All right, YouTube, it's back to Yellowstone time here. There are multiple links in the description, so, peruse them as you wish. Because there's new information and some weird things happening apparently at Yellowstone. As an aside, well, it's ongoing in Pradesh, India. There's apparently a volcano that appears to have woken up there. There was one in Macedonia, actually, that appears to now be having a minor eruption. Apparently, steel poles in the area have become red hot. There is now, the smell of sulfur everywhere, and people are starting to worry. I looked at the Hindu Times article for that volcano, and all the comments section was people who are obviously Hindu talking about the gods, punishing them for some reason. Specifically because of their prime minister, which I thought was pretty funny. But at Yellowstone, it's a little bit of a different story. Now, I'll give a little bit more credit to the scientific community, assume that they're not willfully trying to mislead people. And I think the reason for what I'm about to explain is happening here is that they simply don't want people to worry, and they're sort of hoping that supervolcanoes don't act the same way as normal volcanoes on a routine basis. And so the evidence that's there of a possible impending eruption doesn't apply somehow. But helium levels are apparently still rising at Yellowstone. And if that were happening at any other volcanically active region, people would be, within the geological community would be worrying. There are seemingly harmonic tremors going on, which could be indicative that lava is moving around under the ground. When you get that harmonic sort of tremor, it's not indicative of regular seismic activity. It becomes more indicative of the movement of magma. The people monitoring Yellowstone, the USGS, appear to have turned off a large amount of their equipment right after it started showing various aberrant readings. Now, it could be just down for maintenance. It seems a little bit odd that it would be multiple locations and multiple systems at once. I suppose you can give them the benefit of the doubt there, but I think what's happening is you have all of and there's a temperature rise as well. There was a spike in the water temperature levels, and although I can't confirm it, because, I don't sit there 24/7 looking at live feeds of all of Yellowstone's geysers. There's a Before It's News article on this. It's a YouTube video. I'll link it in the description as well. There's one video claiming that the geyser activity around one of these basins has substantially increased, that geysers in that location not known to erupt very often are now erupting with fair regularity. There was one video, and I'll link that too if I can dig through and find it, which appeared to show Old Faithful suddenly ripping a fissure and jettisoning steam out of, instead of normally there's a blowhole sort of thing there at the geyser, and it squirts the water up in the air. Instead of that, it appears to now have a crack running from its base that steam was simply pouring out of. There was some weird light coming out of it, although it could have been, someone's headlights for all I know. There's also reports, and this does seem to be true, which is worrying. It seems that one or both of the webcam live feeds aren't actually live because they don't sync up. Now, I looked at both feeds for about an hour earlier today to see if they synced up, to see if there was some relation between the one that spits out an updated image roughly every 30 seconds and the one that purports to be completely live. There's no similarity whatsoever. The clouds in the sky are completely different. The people that are standing in each location are completely different. There was, for instance, a person in a wheelchair right at the end of the walkway. Clearly would have been visible from both cameras. They never showed up on the one that updated every 30 seconds. So one of these cams is not live, at least one of them. That's strange, because they both purport to be live cams of Old Faithful Geyser. And they're not. At least one of them is either running a loop of some sort, or simply is repeating footage that's been archived, or the timing is completely off. and it's broadcasting stuff with a 5 or 6 hour delay or one of these things. It could be both of them are on a substantial delay, just because they're afraid that suddenly, magma is going to start pouring out of the ground. But all of the signs point to something destabilizing at this site, and you don't need to be a brilliant individual to understand when you look at the seismic graphs that are posted by the USGS itself, and then you realize that in the last 3 days, there have only been a handful of earthquakes. Before that, there was a week where there were, like 150 earthquakes over that week-long period, which is quite a bit higher than normal. The normal, looking at their graph, seems to be 2 or 3 quakes a week, maybe as many as 10 on an off day in a week-long period. Not that many quakes. And that graph goes all the way back to the 90s. Then you look at the last month or so, and it's far higher than that for a sustained period, which also doesn't appear on that graph anywhere. And then all of a sudden, the tiltometers or the tiltometers, whichever you pronounce it as, the machines around the area that was experiencing the quake swarm suddenly went offline, and people were mystified. Now, it could be that it's down for maintenance. That does not seem to be the case. There's no legitimate reason. If nothing severe is happening in this region, then it's strange to think that this equipment, which is probably costs millions of dollars apiece, would suddenly start malfunctioning during a quake swarm. It's dealt with worse before in the past, presumably. Otherwise, it's not built to withstand even a 3.0 earthquake, and did get fucked up, in which case, well, that's indicative that I guess they weren't expecting to see that level of seismicity at this region. But there does seem to be something going on at the location when you have all of these things coming together. And of course, you can look through and you can look at other volcanoes, and you can clearly see that when people start smelling sulfur and there's unusual spring activity in the area, and the temperature is increasing and the ground is moving and you get harmonic tremors, that people predict that some sort of event is going to happen. An eruption, an explosion, a severe earthquake, something's up because things are getting fucked up underneath the ground and they're moving around. Interestingly, there was a fluff story posted a while back on how the magma chamber is several times larger than previously expected, and so that means it's less likely to erupt. No, I'm sure that they couldn't have been. I'm sure that the team at the University of Utah that released this report couldn't have been leaned on by Uncle Sam, because we're headed into tourist season at Yellowstone, and I'm sure that they wouldn't have any reason to put out this report to prevent people from being dissuaded from visiting what is essentially the world's largest active volcano that just happens to be covered with pretty grass and grizzly bears. I'm sure that couldn't possibly be an ulterior motive there. But there's another article that was on RT that's taken from scientists that were working in partnership with CERN that clearly says that a supervolcano, to the best of their estimates, as the result of their own tests, could in theory explode on its own at any time without any prior warning, and requires no external trigger. You don't even need magma breaking the surface, because it's under so much pressure that it simply shifts a few inches to one side. Suddenly it maximizes and explodes. Also, to people who are talking about the size of the magma chamber, they've already done imaging. It's not just, it's a blob of magma sitting right under the ground. No, it's also got a tube that extends down something like 400 miles into the earth, that probably connects it directly with liquefied mantle, a gigantic tube of lava. Perhaps what we're seeing with this magma pool that's under the ground, that is admittedly probably sort of maybe kind of cooling, is that it got cut off from that tube but could reconnect at any time, or it could just explode and the tube could refill the chamber. There are several documentaries about the Yellowstone supervolcano. They're pretty good. The one from, I believe, Discovery Channel is more interesting and more informative than the others, although they're all pretty good when you think about it. I think what's happening here is that the scientists are getting freaked out, which is why they're turning off the monitors undergoing maintenance, which is why the webcams appear fucked up, which is why you don't really see much now in the media, and why you saw, for instance, that bison running away from Yellowstone story looks to have been planted there to create a sort of easily refuted straw man, because anyone with half a brain knows that these animals migrate seasonally. It was easily refuted, easily explained away, and it caught people's attention and then distracted them. And then it was explained away, and they said, oh, well, I guess that's all settled then. Yellowstone's not going to erupt. But you've got all of this other information coming out of the park for those of us who actually watch the USGS quake map on a daily basis, which I do several times per day, just to see if, Fukushima just got tsunamied again or not. Yes, something appears to be going on at Yellowstone Park. And it's really not even a park, it's an active volcano. These people literally that go to this park to look at these geysers are standing on top of an active volcano that is miles and miles across. It's enormous. It's larger than this entire county that I'm currently in. And it's ringed, it's basically a gigantic crater. And it's smoldering. And it's releasing all of these fumes and this water vapor and this enormous amount of heat. And it could, according to scientists themselves, explode basically at any time without warning. But if it were to explode a month from now, we couldn't say we didn't get warning, because the helium increase, the temperature increase, the supposedly aberrant actions of these geysers are all indicative of a possible eruption. Now, if it erupts, there are several possibilities, and not all of them are, extinction level, world's ending, man, the era of man has come and gone situations. One possibility is a far smaller type of explosion that apparently happens more frequently at the park, where it's mostly a release of steam in contact with water. It would still go off with the force of a nuclear bomb, and then some. It would still wipe out anyone who happens to be near the park when it goes off, which means, people's corpses would be flying hundreds of miles through the air potentially, or going into orbit. But it wouldn't be a world-ending scenario, and the worst-case scenario in that case would be sort of a year without a summer. There would be, colder than normal temperatures. Things would quickly get back to normal. It wouldn't really affect life outside of, within a couple 100 miles of Yellowstone very much. There might be some localized famine in areas that get, hit by cold that are marginal to begin with, but it wouldn't be that bad. Sorry to the people who live in the Yellowstone area, but that's actually the preferable scenario. A worse scenario would be a total eruption, but one which is smaller than the larger scale ones that have happened in the past. If you look at the map where they show the last 3 eruptions, clearly they're different sizes, they were different intensities. If it's on the lower scale there, or lower than all 3, it probably won't cause the human race to go extinct. But if it's on the upper end, or it's larger than all 3, yeah, that could probably happen, because you're talking about a reduction in world temperature by 20 or 30 degrees for an extended period of time, which means there would be barely any land on the face of the earth that would be farmable. And people would be probably cannibalizing each other, and then eventually maybe there'd be some people left to repopulate after things go back to normal. For all we know, if the Earth cooled off by that large a margin, we could see the glaciers coming back. We wouldn't have to worry about climate disruption, I guess, because not only would it destroy all world industry, and there'd be no CO2 emissions, and it would reduce the population by like 99%. Not only that, but it would also just immediately refrigerate the entire planet. And areas that have never seen snow would suddenly become Arctic wonderlands. Then there's the possibility, of course, that it just, rips the whole world open and sends it flying off in different directions. I'm just joking. That's actually not a possibility. Essentially, you've got smaller eruption, or you've got big asshole eruption at this park. So, people are probably hoping for the former. Doesn't really matter, because, hundreds of thousands of people are going to die, even in that so-called better scenario. But there are things going on at this park. So there are links in the description for you if you're interested in the topic at all. I know some people just shrug it off and don't care. Some people are like, oh, well, it won't, cause anything. It won't hurt me because I'm not in the immediate area. They don't even think about the ash fall and the climate change afterwards. Typically, these are the same people that seem to believe that food's natural habitat is in cans and jars at the grocery store. They don't realize that all of the food that they eat is grown or raised, somewhere else, typically in arable areas, which would be frozen solid. My home state would become permafrost. There'd be probably nothing left of it because we're cold enough to begin with. It gets to 20 below some years in the winter here anyway, so I can't even imagine what would happen if 50 below suddenly swept through the area for an extended period of time. It would be unsurvivable, especially when there probably wouldn't be any electricity or food. People would simply huddle up and shoot themselves. So, there are things going on at Yellowstone, so everyone's sort of hoping that the scientists, if they're being skeptical about this, are right, and that maybe this isn't indicating anything's going on because it's a supervolcano, so it's special. It's bigger than normal, so it doesn't act the same. The same physics somehow magically aren't involved. I would like to believe that. I would like to be optimistic enough to believe that it is dead, like some of the fluff stories claim. It'll never erupt again. It will never harm mankind. Of course, then we've got other supervolcanoes like Toba that could also blow up with the same force. Nobody wants to talk about them. But while that's something we can hope for, I don't think it's something we can reasonably expect. I think if the past is any indicator, we are within the date range where we could see another major eruption at Yellowstone. And if that happens, life in North America will not be possible anywhere in the continent. Everybody in the continent will either flee or they will starve and die, unless they happen to live deep underground in a cave in a bunker with about 10 years food supply. I'm sure there are probably people out there that have spent their life digging such a bunker. If you have one, and it blows, might as well seal the hatch. That's about all. Peace out.